and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Komet, and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Jason. How are you this weekend?
I'm doing okay. It's a snowy rain kind of thing going on here today, and just kind of a bit of a dreary staying home kind of day. It's probably a good day to record a podcast.
Absolutely. I will be honest. It's 4:30 p.m. as we're recording this, and I have yet to go outside. So I'm very much in the same boat of sticking around the house this weekend.
Just if you are a new listener, I always like to ask this, Scott, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
We cover soccer in Calgary at all levels, whether that's amateur youth soccer or collegiate post-secondary soccer with the Dinos and the Cougars and the Trojans, or right up to the professional level, Cavalry FC. We talk about them a lot. So essentially, we talk about the teams and the players from Calgary's soccer community, from grassroots up to professional.
This week, we're going to talk about a few things that have been going on in Cavalry's world. They announced their preliminary roster for CONCACAF. They also released their regular season schedule, and they had a big departure this week with one of their assistant coaches going on to a much bigger stage. We'll also talk about a few Calgarians which have signed on in Europe lately, and also we'll talk a little bit about Caleigh Hunter, who is with Canada's U17 club right now in the CONCACAF championships.
Yeah, for February, there's a lot going on to talk about and keep our podcast relevant. Definitely another Cavalry-centric episode with a few different things to discuss. But there's also some player movements that we're going to delve into a little bit. Grace Stordy, who we've talked about a couple of times, including in our last episode. She landed a pro contract in Portugal, and another player, Boeckx, and is with a team in Ireland, and there's a few other things to discuss as well. So I'm excited to delve into it.
Let's start though with a bit of surprising news that came out of Cavalry's camp this week. I think this probably caught just about everyone by surprise, but Cavalry's assistant coach and technical director, Leon Hapgood, a former podcast guest of ours, is moving on to MLS and to NYCFC, where he's going to be an assistant coach.
Yeah, this definitely came out of nowhere, didn't it? But what a move for Leon. That's the kind of opportunity you simply can't turn down. I mean, just look at some of the teams and the players that his new club plays against, right? Like he'll be on the bench when New York takes on Inter Miami with Lionel Messi on the other side. It's another example of, people using the Canadian Premier League as a springboard to move on to, like you said, bigger stages. MLS is definitely a bigger stage. Usually it's been players, so it's a bit interesting to see an assistant coach make that kind of move. I was very curious what led to it, right? Like how did Leon end up on New York City FC's radar, and read through a couple of the press releases and announcements, and it turns out that Leon and New York's head coach Nick Cushing actually do go back quite a ways. They met 13 years ago when Leon was relatively new to Calgary and was involved with Foothills at the youth level, and Nick Cushing was involved with Manchester City's youth academy, and they came to Canada, or it may have been vice versa, and the Foothills team went to Manchester. But they've known each other for quite some time and have kept in touch and followed each other's careers. So this is a case, I think, of Nick Cushing tapping Leon to join the club, and what a move! Hey, like not just from the perspective of moving up to MLS, but the opportunity to move to New York and pursue your passion. I think that's just a really cool opportunity for him.
Absolutely. What more could you ask for, really? Like glamorous city and bigger league, and everything about it just is, it's one of those opportunities. Yeah, I think it would be really hard to let it go. And it speaks well for, again, this whole sort of mechanism that Cavalry has created. I know Tommy Wilden Jr. said before that, didn't he refer to it as sort of, we're creating a football industry here or something to that effect, where we're not only players, but coaches and that sort of thing. And well, we know Martin Nash moved on from here to go to York United. So I would say right now that if you are somebody who is ambitious and wants to move up in the footballing world, an opportunity with Cavalry is, there's a lot of examples of how being with this club gets you noticed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's been speculation throughout the Cavalry's run in the last few years, whether Tommy Wheeldon Jr. would move on, either join an MLS program or potentially be involved with Canada Soccer or something like that, right? For an assistant coach to make that move is maybe unprecedented. I don't know. I don't pay too close attention to what the other CPL clubs assistant coaches do. No, like we've said, it's a great opportunity for Leon. I think he'll definitely be missed, right? Like Tommy talked about Leon's impact probably 3 or 4 times in post-game press conferences, usually when asked about set pieces, right? Because Cavalry's been very prolific on set pieces throughout their 5-year history, and Tommy always credited Leon for the detail that he would pay when it comes to preparing Cavalry for free kicks and corner kicks and things like that. But beyond that, I mean, Leon's vocal, right? If you're watching the broadcast, you can often hear him yelling, right? And if you're at the stadium, you can too. Like he's a very passionate coach, and he's definitely been a big figure in Calgary's soccer community, not just with Cavalry, but with Foothills over the years. So a big loss. I'm curious to see if anyone or who comes in to replace him.
Yeah, that was the next thing I wanted to get to, is who fills that hole. It's a big hole because he was really involved in a lot of the tactical stuff, the set pieces, that sort of thing. And he's also been, Tommy's right-hand man, who kind of steps into that role and who fills in. Is it going to be more promotion from within, or are they going to look somewhere else? All the preparations going on for Orlando and this coming out of nowhere. I'll be curious to see what the timelines are and how that all plays out. But I would think right now that there will probably be a lot of people calling up Tommy and saying, hey, I want to throw my hat in the ring to be an assistant coach, because it seems like this is a good place to get an opportunity.
Yeah. And I know I can think of a lot of Calgary-based coaches who are, they have their coaching badges, they'd be qualified, but they haven't had that kind of CPL experience yet. So I don't actually want to name any names quite yet, because I could also see Cavalry recruiting from outward, right? They did that with their goalkeeping coach last year when Jordan Santiago left. They brought in an outsider from the US who appears to have done a really good job with the club's goalkeepers. So I could see them going, you know what, that worked, and we could do that again. But like I said at the beginning, there are, Calgary has a lot of really good coaches who have been played at a high level, or they've been coaching for decades at various levels. So I wouldn't be surprised either way.
Let's move on to some other Cavalry news. We also saw the roster for the CONCACAF Champions League matches against Orlando. At least, I guess it's an initial roster. I don't think it's the finished product. Isn't that how you understand it, Scott?
Yeah, this is a 21 player roster, and I believe you're allowed either 23 or 24 for that tournament. They have until February 17th to announce any other players, and I wouldn't be surprised if we hear at least one, maybe 2 more names, because I do think when I was looking through that roster, there were a couple of positions where I was wondering, who do they have for right wing, or who do they have for this spot? But we'll kind of go through by position and talk a little bit about who's on that list so far. So I'll start with the goalkeepers. Marco Carducci, number 1, very not a surprise at all. But then the other 2 goalkeepers listed are development contract players. So there's Mitchell Barrett and Blake Morrison. So that means no Joseph Holiday, who was with the club last year.
Yeah, I was mildly surprised at that. I hadn't heard anything much about what Holiday's been up to, and if he's been around. But I'm a bit surprised by that. And I would say out of those developmental keepers, Mitchell Barrett is, I think, the more experienced one, and is probably the one most likely to be sitting on the bench for those Orlando games.
Yeah, I imagine, barring injury or like a red card, Marco's going to play both games full 90. He pretty much played the entire season last year. I have to admit, I don't know that much about Mitchell Barrett or Blake Morrison. All I know is that they kind of came through the Cavalry pathway, which is I'm assuming they were in League One last year with Cavalry, or maybe even were they with the AMSL team before that?
Barrett basically was the main keeper for the League One team, and I think he also got more minutes on the AMSL team than anybody else. I think Morrison played a little bit for one or the other or both of those teams, but Barrett got the lion's share of the minutes for sure.
I just pulled up an article that Mitchell Barrett, he did have a trial with Fulham FC last year. He's been overseas. No, I imagine we're going to see Marco play both of these games this month, and we'll see kind of what the full 2024 roster looks like in the weeks after that.
Let's move on to defender, and I'll read off the list here. Pretty familiar names: Fraser Aird, Michael Harms, Dan Klomp, Cal Montgomery, Eric Kobsa, Bradley Camden Thiwo, and Tom Field.
Yeah, Field was picked up recently. I was curious, Fraser Aird was included. I know he's kind of like a wing back, right? Like he gets forward a lot. A pretty good depth overall for defense there, I would say. And then in midfield, we've got Charlie Trafford, another one who's been re-signed since our last episode, Shamit Shome, and then the newcomer from Valor, Diego Gutierrez. Jesse Daly, the Australian, is back. Mael Henry, he's back. And then a very familiar name, Sergio Camargo. That kind of rounds out the midfield. I feel like this is their thinnest position. And this is where I think we would see another name or two in the next 2 weeks, because that's not a lot of midfield depth. Although, like I said, I think I see Fraser Aird more as a midfielder than as an out defender. But yeah, that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, when I look at that list of midfielders, I guess the first thing that jumps to mind is, where is Diego Gutierrez going to line up relative to everyone else, and how is he going to fit into that list of existing players? He's the one newcomer and obviously a big signing. So
no, those are pretty much all central midfielders too, right? Like I see at least 3 defensive midfielders, and then the other 3 are offensive midfielders. So yeah, so we've got three of each, but none of those 6 are really wide players, right? Like none of them are wingers.
Right. And then when it comes to the forwards, we have Leighton Brooks, the newcomer from Australia, which I think he's still waiting on his international clearance. Willie Akio, Ali Musi, Tobias Warshevsky, and Meyer Bevan. That's it's quite a list.
Yeah, and here I do see some wide players like Willie Akio. I believe he's really comfortable on the left wing, and then Ali Musi, again, he's kind of floats between midfield and forward, but I imagine he'll definitely. I think he'll be starting if he's fit. And then the newcomer is Leighton Brooks if he's cleared by then, and then the German who was previously with FC Edmonton, Tobias Warshevsky, and then New Zealander Meyer Bevan coming back. So yeah, good talent up front, definitely, and I'll be interested to see who ultimately gets the nod to start.
It is coming up. It's creeping up on us. Just like you said, I believe the deadline to add is February 17th, and we could see something happen between now and then. I also want to mention in this press release with this 21-man roster, it was also announced that Ethan Beckford has been transferred to a club in the UK, so he won't be back with Cavalry this year.
No, he was, I believe, signed on a multi-year deal after really excelling in the 2022 League One Ontario season. I think he was scoring like a goal a game that campaign, but he really didn't find his footing with Cavalry, at least in terms of finding the back of the net. He had some really, I think, strong performances, but he just had a lot of bad luck when it came to putting the ball in the net. He didn't score. I know he hit the post maybe once or twice.
Mm-hmm.
And it looked like his confidence was cracking when he just wasn't scoring. And I think in the last several weeks of the season, he kind of either out of favor or he was injured, but he just wasn't getting subbed in anymore. So it wasn't too surprising to see that he's not going to be with the club this year.
Staying with Cavalry, also the entire Canadian Premier League schedule was announced, and we found out that the home opener at Spruce Meadows this year is on April 28th.
Yeah, I believe this is going to be the earliest home opener for Cavalry. I know usually they don't host any matches until May, which means they always start their season on the road. And I believe they still are starting their season on the road this year, similar to last year, where I remember they they had 3 games on the road to start the season, and in 2022 it was very similar. So it kind of puts them behind the 8 ball in terms of getting your campaign off to a good start. But no, it always made sense to me that Cavalry started on the road, because I figured that the pitch at Atco Field wouldn't be ready in April, depending on what Calgary's winter was like. Considering how this winter has gone, I can't imagine the grass is going to be in too poor of condition come late April. Yeah, I don't have too many thoughts regarding the overall schedule. I just glanced at it. I didn't really dive into it too much, but I don't know. Do you have anything you'd like to say about, the first start to the season for them?
The one thing I noticed when I looked at the schedule was there's basically no midweek games. It's pretty much Friday, Saturday, Sunday for home matches. Not sure about this, but if there's one Wednesday game, that would be the absolute most. So it seems like every year the schedule seems to smooth out a little bit more, and they're able to pick out the optimal dates, because I know it's always a bit of a challenge when you've got to plan around these equestrian events, which, the schedule for those have been carved in stone for years in advance, and you have to work around those. And maybe the first year or so, it was a bit more of a challenge to sort of get that all figured out. But I think they've really sort of found the way to maximize getting the best dates now. So I think that's the only thing I really noticed.
Yeah, for sure. So I did pull it up. They've got Forge on April 13th at 2 p.m. And then their second game is also on the road, April 20th in Ottawa against Atletico. And then they host Pacific the following weekend. And then Vancouver FC a week after that. Yeah, I mean, weekend games are obviously better for atmosphere, and they draw bigger crowds typically. So it bodes well for the attendance. And I think attendance is so important for Cavalry when it comes to their reputation, right? Because so many people come to a game, and when the stadium is full, it's just so much more exciting, and that makes them want to come back. Whereas if your first game is like a Wednesday night that only 2,500 people go out to, you'll be less inclined to go back again, even on a weekend. So, and yeah, like you said, that's hard to work around when you have these big international equestrian events, but they seem to have found their rhythm and found a balance for that.
Got one more story with the Cavalry angle. It's been reported that Nico Giantopoulos is back in Calgary, and he's training with the Cavs. He's currently not signed by anyone, not by the Cavs or anyone else, and he's not on the CONCACAF roster. What do you think this is all about, Scott?
So he has left York United. Is that confirmed?
Well, he's unsigned. He's a free agent.
So they could pick him back up, or he may go somewhere else. Hey,
what I understand from reading a couple different things is that York has offered him contract, maybe more than one contract, but they haven't come to terms. Yeah, they're either at an impasse, or there's something else going on. But he is a free agent as of now.
Well, I really don't see him being willing to be a backup again. He was, maybe not all of our listeners know, he was Cavalry's backup in 2019 and in 2020 as well. But he's really established himself as a starting goalkeeper, right? Like, he has that caliber. He's been with York for 3 years now, 3 years. Yeah, 21, 22, and 23. I imagine he's just keeping fit with familiar faces, right? I'm sure Tommy would have had no objections if he was asked by him if he could train with the Cavs for a bit. But again, I'm just speculating. I don't know how that kind of thing works, but I don't anticipate an announcement that Nico's come back.
I would be shocked if he came back. It really doesn't make sense. The team has a salary cap, and a backup keeper, there isn't a lot of room to spend a lot of money on a backup keeper. So I don't really see what the enticement would be. Come back to Calgary and play less, get paid less. It doesn't really add up from that standpoint. So at least partly to do with the fact that the Cavs have started training a bit earlier this year, and it's an opportunity to train with a pro club now, as opposed to trying to keep yourself fit kind of on your own. I will throw it out there for crazy theories. There's only one other possible explanation as to why you bring him to town and why he would he be hanging around the club, is that if for some reason there was a thought that the Cavs needed a new number one.
Yeah, you think so, hey?
Well, I think it's super unlikely, but crazier things have happened, right? Someone from NYCFC calls up and an opportunity becomes available for a coach. You never know. I think, like I said, I think it's highly unlikely, but that to me is the only possible way that he would sign with the Cavs.
That's an interesting thing to bring up. Yeah, I mean, Marco Carducci is the club captain. I believe he's on like a long-term deal. It's not like a 1 or 2 year contract. It's possibly even longer. So definitely worth bringing up as speculation. But yeah, I think that's quite the reach.
Oh yeah, like I am not basing it on anything. It's just that when I sort of look at the reasons why he would sign in Calgary, that is the only reason you'd sign, is that if there was an opening there. It just doesn't seem to make sense for any other reason. So I think it's a 99.8% chance that he's just training with the club, and maybe a 0.2% chance it's option number 2. But those are the only 2 scenarios that I can really see that why he's here.
For sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
Let's move on to some different topics here that are non-Cavalry related, and a couple Calgarians and other players with Calgary connections that have recently signed their first pro contracts and are on their way to Europe.
Yeah, we just saw a few days ago that Grace Stordy, formerly with Foothills WFC, as well as the University of Memphis, she had declared for the NWSL draft, but her name was not picked. She has signed with SC Braga in Portugal.
That seems like a pretty good move from what I can tell. I am the first to say I don't know a thing about the Portuguese women's league, but it does seem to be a league on the rise, and some of the bigger clubs have, I think, taken to building up their women's rosters and really increasing the quality of play. So I think it's a decent move. I guess if you're going to go over to Europe, the chances of signing in the French or English league right off the bat are probably not extraordinarily high, but this seems like a pretty good entry point from what I can tell, at least.
For sure. Yeah. I don't know much about Portuguese football in general, men's or women's, but I do know Braga, their team plays in that stadium where it's like up against a mountain or something, like a cliff.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, if you pull them up on YouTube or something, I believe it was a Euro 2004 stadium, and it's just a very unique ground because on one side they just have this huge rock cliff. I don't know if the women's team plays there, but that's the only thing that I really know about Braga. Yeah, I'm sure it'll be an adventure, right? Like from professional soccer standpoint, as well as just from a lifestyle perspective, it's a great opportunity for Grace. I've mentioned a few times on the podcast, but in the games that I went to last summer, the WFC games, she was probably the player who I thought had the biggest impact. I know Maya Jones, she was banging in the goals every game, but I was really impressed by Grace Stordy on the right wing, just her immediate impact when she'd get on the ball, her ability to beat her defender and whip in crosses was quite impressive. So I was wondering if she'd get picked for the NWSL. She didn't, but looks like she still managed to carve out a professional career for herself.
We'll be watching what happens in her first games with great interest, and we'll continue to provide updates from time to time. The other Calgarian that also signed their first pro contract this week was Caleigh Boeckx. Graduated from Rice University in 2022. That was her last season playing NCAA soccer. And she also played with Foothills WFC. She is signed with Treaty United in Ireland. I'm kind of intrigued by Treaty United. They're an Irish team. They play in the top tier of Irish women's football. They previously signed another Calgarian. That's Talia White, and she's a former UFC Dino. This is a club that has not only 2 Canadians, they have 2 Calgarians on the roster. So I don't think there are too many other clubs out there that have 2 female Calgarians on the same team.
Yeah, I don't know any, but you were talking about Treaty United recently, and it would be great to dive a little bit more into who they are and how it became that 2 Calgarians have ended up over there. So there's definitely a story regarding them. And then in terms of other player moves, we saw that another former Foothills WFC player, as well as University of Memphis player, Seorla Miller, she signed with a club in Iceland called Keflavik. She's not from Calgary per se. She's from Halifax. But she was with Foothills WFC in the past, and she's yet another Canadian on Memphis. And then the last player we'll mention before moving on to another topic is On the men's side, former Cavalry player Arabin Pepple. He's been with Luton Town, but he spent most of his time since being signed with Luton Town on loan. And he is going to Inverness Caledonian Thistle in Scotland's second division. They're currently 7th place in that league, but it hopefully will be an opportunity for him to get some regular playing time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just these loans haven't really worked out for him so far. So hopefully this one is one where he gets a chance to shine.
Yeah, I think he was with like Grimsby at one point.
Mm-hmm. I think it was Grimsby last year, and it was a team in the National League, the 5th division this year. I can't remember which one.
Yeah, Bromley.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Bromley, but I pulled up his Wikipedia. It says he's already played a game for Inverness, so that must have been this weekend, if this is accurate. I know it's Wikipedia.
Well, I can see right here that they did play today and they lost. So maybe he was involved in that match.
That's how quickly our podcast is updated.
Yep. But yeah, he was substituted in that match.
Right on. So yeah, he's already got a game under his belt in Scotland's second division. So we'll move on to one of our last topics, I believe. This is some national program related news. Caleigh Hunter, who we've talked about a little bit on our podcast throughout the months. She was selected to Canada's U17 team that is currently playing at the CONCACAF Championship. I think they're being held in Mexico. And she did play in Canada's opening match the other day, which was a 5-0 win over Puerto Rico. She played the first half on the left wing, and it appears that she came off either at halftime or very early into the second half.
Yeah, it's exciting to see her get the start, and a couple more games in the group phase. I think next one is against Panama on Sunday, and then on Tuesday they're playing the Americans.
Yeah, that'll probably be the biggest and toughest match of the group stage. When this episode is released, that Panama game may have occurred already. But no, that should be a really, it'll be exciting to see if they can get through this group. They're obviously off to a great start, but I imagine Puerto Rico will be the easiest opponent they face in this group.
The Calgary soccer scene in the first week of February, I think we had a lot of topics. I don't think there's a whole lot else we need to add in this week. Is there never a dull moment? I thought we weren't going to see too much happening, but what do you think, Scott? More than you expected?
Definitely. I mean, it goes to show how soccer has become a 12-month-a-year thing. But we didn't have a guest this week. Hopefully we'll have a guest for our next episode. We have a lot of ideas for guests. So as long as things come together, we should be able to have an interview pretty soon. But no, we were able to pull together a pretty comprehensive episode.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast using all the usual podcasting platforms. Head over to our website at yycsoccer.com, and there's more info about how to subscribe to the podcast or how to leave a question or comment. You can also follow us on Twitter or X at YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.